My main concern was the ride home where I knew I was going to have to explain to my wife the fact that I no longer was employed and I had a good job. Like I was making good money. It wasn't like, the job was crap. It was good. I was making good money. I had good benefits.
Unfinished Business Podcast Show with your host, David Slyman.
Welcome back to Unfinished Business. I am your host, Dave Slyman. I am super pumped about our guest today, Paul Byrne. This guy is the CEO of Rozoyo, okay? We're going to be talking about custom software. And if you're an organization, a small, medium-sized, or large business, at some point you may have thought about custom software. And this is going to be the conversation surrounding that. And Paul is a true expert in the space. So we're going to talk about that. We're also going to talk about him dropping a grenade in his career at one point and ultimately starting his own business. He literally did that. And then we're going to talk about security. We're going to drop some FBI stuff into this. I mean, it's going to be a great show. So check out this show. Paul, thanks for being here. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, David. It's great to be here. I really enjoyed talking to you.
Great. Well, listen, we got to start there, right? I mean, you're in corporate America. I'm going to let you tell the story, but essentially you were just fed up and you said, I'm starting my own gig. Let's talk a little bit about how that all started. And you created the company today. You're president of Rozoyo.
Yeah, absolutely. So it was one of those career moments. By the way, I just want to be clear. I do not recommend this as a career strategy to anybody.
This is
It
real
was
stories, man. These are real stories. You don't have to sugarcoat it, man. You don't
yeah.
have to sugarcoat it.
No, I just don't want people to think that I'm advocating them to quit their job without thinking it
Understand.
through.
Understand.
Yeah, which I did. So yeah, I had been working in that particular company for about 7 years. I was the chief marketing officer, and we were doing business with some large retail organizations. And I had a little team I was running some services, really kind of running the marketing and product development. And I got to this point where it was just one more call, and I wasn't happy. And so in the middle of the call, and it was an online call in 2009, believe it or not.
Okay.
I think we were using GoToMeeting, and I literally just hung up and turned on my desk, and wrote an email to my boss and told him I was done. And then I got up and kind of walked away. I actually had to give someone who was visiting us at from a different office a ride to the airport.
Now, Paul, realistically, how much time after you had been this meeting did you put this email together and send it off and say, I'm done?
Oh, seconds.
Okay.
Yeah, it was
Like you
within.
said, he's not, we're not recommending this, everybody, but ultimately it worked for Paul because he's got a really successful company. We're going to dig into that. So was there any point at this, like after you said, oh shit, what did I just do? Or were you like, you know what, I'm done, man. I'm trailblazing. I'm going.
My main concern was the ride home where I knew I was going to have to explain to my wife the fact that I no longer was employed and I had a good job. Like I was making good money. It
Yeah,
wasn't
yeah.
like, the job was crap. It was good. I was making good money. I had good benefits. And, yeah, so that was probably the hardest part, but I had known, and I had even spoken to my boss who was a friend. We had worked together previously in PepsiCo, and he'd been my boss, and we'd actually won some awards together there and so forth. So we had kind of a tighter relationship. So I don't think he was expecting this, but I don't think he was completely surprised because I had mentioned before, I'd kind of like to do my own thing. I really feel like, that now
Did you
I
have
did
stuff
not.
in the works at this point when
No,
you dropped the grenade? You didn't have
no,
anything in the work? Okay. All right.
no,
So,
nothing.
hey, listen, sometimes that works for people and obviously for you, but so now you drop this bomb, you come home, you tell your wife, like, what do you do the
Right.
next day?
So I knew I had been kind of saving up for a while just because
Gotcha.
I was
Okay, so
kind
you
of
were preparing.
fis- fiscally concerned. I was not prepared for this moment, but I was fiscally conservative. I was thinking I'd maybe start some side hustle or something like start up a company on the side. Eventually, I didn't. I had no time frame. I had no plans. I didn't even know what kind of company. Right. Uh, so I was, I just. I think everything in my mind just came to a head or
Yeah,
something
yeah.
at that point.
Switch.
Yeah, yeah. So but I knew, I knew I wasn't going to be on the street or lose my house or anything like that. I had enough of a cushion at that point. I mean, I was like 45, almost 45 at that point, and my kids were in college, and
Yeah,
so
you're ready. What did you
yeah.
do day one? I want to know what you did day one after you dropped the dropped the position.
So So I had a friend who ran a kind of a side business with his wife, and we were clients of them. It was a data entry business. And he kind of offered me, he said, "Hey, like I think you could do a lot for our business. How would you like to join and become a partner?" And within, I guess, 6 months, I was a partner in that business, and I was
Okay.
bringing new revenue in and so forth. And I was also so, despite the way everything ended, I still have a good relationship with the gentleman who was my boss at the time. But even then, I think he took pity on me, and he sort of looked for opportunities for consulting work that I could do. So I started doing the consulting work. I reached out to some other organizations I had. I started doing some consulting work with them, in the mostly in the marketing space, and some advertising, which is what I was doing at the time. But I kind of, one thing led to another, and I ended up doing e-commerce work for, kind of on a contract, to my old employer through this new company that I was a partner in, and
Gotcha.
eventually built up that business. The kind of the watershed moment in building the business was, I was working on a platform called Pro Stores, which was owned by eBay.
Okay.
And eBay was not happy with the people that had been running their pre-sales support. So basically, when you call in to eBay, you were interested in a Pro Stores store, then you would talk to somebody and you say, "Hey, can it do this? Can it do that? Where can I learn about it?" Like there was kind of this
Yeah.
technical
Yeah.
aspect to the sale, right? And so
Yep.
that was called pre-sales support. And so they asked me to put together a team to handle those calls, and I said, "Sure." And 6 months later, you called Pro Stores and our phone rang. So,
Gotcha. Gotcha.
yeah,
That was the inception of your company at that point, where
it,
you were
yeah,
taking it on your own.
yeah. Yeah, it
Great.
really.
Great. So tell everybody right now, Rizzolio, what you do exactly. I mean, I know, but I want you to tell it in your terms to our listeners out there.
Sure, absolutely. So we develop custom web applications and SaaS platforms for companies, mid-tier companies. So you think about a company that either has a platform that needs to be rebuilt, or maybe they're a startup and they have a proof of concept and some funding, then they would come to us and we would develop their application for them.
Gotcha. Great. Great.
And then we still have our e-commerce consultancy and software development side of the business, but our growth and more than half of our business is in custom development.
Excellent. Excellent. So when you started your business, obviously had some money put away. You were able to jump in on some clients. Did you need any financial backing, or did you just kind of like, I've got enough work to start that could get me going?
Yeah, totally bootstrapped. I was between like what I was able to cobble together from consulting gigs and the little bit of income we had in the company, that we split,
Uh-huh.
and the just other random sort of opportunities that I got involved in, yeah, I was able to sort of pay my own bills and not,
Yeah.
so I wasn't draining my reserve completely, right? Like I was, and I had a few years where, you know, I didn't buy much stuff. I didn't, no extras. Was not eating out, things like that, just to make sure that I could have as much run rate
Sure. Yeah, that's
as we
great.
needed, and eventually, built and overcame that.
That's great. All right, so talk
Yeah.
to me. What's your approach in going to an organization that comes to you? I mean, I know that you have services that range from, custom software like SaaS platforms, and obviously we
Right.
talked about the e-commerce. But when you go
Right.
into an organization, let's just say e-commerce or a SaaS platform for that matter, or they just
Yeah.
know they need custom software, what's the first thing that you do? Or if you have an if there's a listener out there who has an organization who does need custom software, what
Right.
should they be doing in their first meeting and how should they be exploring this?
Yeah. Our first thing is to address what is normally the biggest challenge for companies in that position, and that is to figure out what they really want, and what their goals are, and to align their technical goals with their business goals. And there are some companies that are
Right.
very good at this,
Hmm.
and they have a product really specked out, and we may advise them on the order in which to execute some of these things or to develop some of these things, but we want to get them from that minimum viable launchable product up to something that's really scalable and growth oriented for them. So we spend most of our time, we don't write any code, probably for the first 3 to 6 months. We
Yeah.
spend a lot of time in meetings with them, and we understand what they're doing, what data and access to data they have to back up what they're trying to do on a business standpoint, understand their business workflows, and then we put that into a plan, which we call a business requirements document. I think that's a pretty standard name for the document, but it's usually a pretty long document that details all of the things that the platform is supposed to do and how those tie into the objectives of the company.
Great.
I Yeah, and then we start iterating on that, and you don't want to look at your project as, I want you know a list of every cobblestone in the road between here and my end game. I want to define what needs to happen first very, very well, and then know what's coming after that. But you're kind of looking down this road, and it's going to have twists and turns and hills and bumps and potholes, right? As business does. And
Yeah.
so you want to you got to get this balance between something being very tightly defined and something that is more aspirational, or a goal that we haven't really researched yet. And so a lot of companies will have their immediate goals, and the first things that they're trying to do are far too vague, right? And they have to, in order to create something valuable and revolutionary perhaps for their business, we have to get really tight on on how that's defined and how we're going to do it and how we're going to implement it and what the implications are for the future on that, and do those implications contradict any of your goals or thoughts about what's coming up. Um, and so we we start working a few months out at a time and getting everything defined, because as you build the system, you're going to become aware of capabilities, or I should say the client will often become aware of capabilities or ideas that will come from some of the innovations that you're creating for them. And they'll say, oh, we can do this thing and it's not going to be super expensive. Maybe I'm going to prioritize that ahead of something that was already on my roadmap, right?
Yeah, it's so funny you say that. I'm going to cut in here because when
Sure.
I did my last startup, I was looking at out of the box software and then custom software,
Mhm.
and we went custom. And what I had to stop correcting. I had to start correcting myself because I would always ask them, "Hey, could we do this?" And they'd say, "Stop asking, can you do this?" Yes,
Yeah.
we can do
Yes.
it. It's just a matter of time and financially. can you have that? And that was the biggest change for me when I started doing the custom software myself. I went through a 3-year run, 4-year run on custom software, and it had its ups and downs. We'll go more into that a little bit, but sorry, I didn't mean
Sure.
to
Yeah.
cut
I'd
you,
love
but
to
it's
kind of
important.
hear about your experience. But
Oh boy. Yeah, go ahead.
yeah, but you know, from when we started the custom stuff, so previously we had really been focused on customizing open source platforms like Magento or something like that, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And and as e-commerce evolved and grew, we realized that that business for the mid-tier merchant had a limited lifespan
Okay.
on there, and we loved working with these mid-tier companies from $1 to $100 million a year in revenue. Yeah, that was our sweet spot. Those were the size and types of organization that we loved working with, and honestly, our systems had been honed to kind of support that type of merchant or
That's
that
right.
type of client. Yeah. So we said, we're not going to change our target, which we could have done. We could have decided, hey, let's work with larger companies that still have these huge customization budgets, and we decided to provide more of a variety of services that required really building new software, and that's how we got involved in the custom SaaS application development.
Yeah.
In fact, we own and operate, market, run one of the most, I think now it may be the most widely used checkout system for online gun sales. So, you can only ship them. You can't ship them to your house. You have to go pick them up at an licensed
Authorized
federal
dealer. Yeah.
dealer, and so we ensure that the customer is choosing that avoids the merchant no longer has to kind of do the dance. Well, I can't ship it to your home. Here's a list of dealers near you. No, we
Right.
automate the whole thing through the checkout, and so that was actually we sort of ate our own dog food first, figured out how to do that, and then started off of that. We started figuring, okay, how do we build these things for other companies? So
That's great.
that was the transition.
Yeah, and right now, I mean, when I think of like you have Magento, you have Shopify, yeah,
Mhm.
there's some few more commerce type programs
Oh,
out there, and that was
yeah,
the funny story about what I did is we did a really good job when our custom software. Now remember, this was 2000. When did I start doing this? Probably about 2014 when I started
okay,
developing that. So it was
yeah,
still the open source stuff was still coming along, I think, at that time. But more
yeah,
importantly, we did a really good job in phase one. It was phase two where the wheels came off. And
yeah,
I'm sure you've seen it. So if you're a company out there and you're doing some development, tell me, I mean, there's some obvious things, but I
yeah.
want you to explain. There's a lot of out of the box programs out there, and
Mhm.
then there's custom. When should you decide as an organization to go custom? And when should you say, you know what, I should stick with an out of the box deal?
Yeah, that's interesting, and that's one of the first questions we look at when we talk to a company, because if they have a legacy system, it's usually built on WordPress or something that, right, something like
Yeah,
that, and they
yeah.
end up with a Franken system
.net.
that only one guy, in the Philippines knows how to operate properly, right?
Yes.
And so if you have to update anything, God forbid. So it becomes a question of recognizing when you're going to end up fighting the system. And I think everybody needs to think of their software as fresh produce. When you develop a new system, it doesn't matter if it's custom or if it's an out of the box system. You're going to end up not only updating it, but probably rewriting it somewhere between 4 and 7 years from now, for a wide variety of reasons, right? Like the language it's based on may no longer be supported, or the open source company stops sending updates, or whatever it is. But also, there are just new technologies that emerge that provide a competitive advantage, and you want to take advantage of those. So the I guess to kind of go back and answer the question, so you got to figure out, okay, when am I going to fight it? How far in the future is that fight? If that fight is 5 to 7 years in the future, then maybe I go with, the open source system, because there's so many things already built in that I can take advantage of, right?
Yeah.
But if you recognize that within the first 3 years that I'm going to have that fight, yeah, then like you should be looking really, really closely at custom system.
Right.
And right. So that's one thing we evaluate. We look at people's objectives and kind of the experiences they want to deliver, and not the ones that just they want to deliver, because there's all kinds of nice to haves, right? There's a, oh, I want to do this on the front end or that or whatever. And I'm
Yeah.
like, yeah, really, but what do you need to, propagate through your website your competitive advantage? And if we can get to that point,
Perspective.
right, we figure it out, and then we can say, you're going to be better served with custom, and because that fight is very, very expensive. And so, yes, you may spend a little bit more to get your first system off the ground, but in the long run, you're going to have a lower total cost of ownership and total cost of execution if you can really, focus in on, customizations, the customizations that you need first.
That's great. It's so let me ask you this question on the flip side. Have
Sure.
have you ever had a story or a situation where you've had a company go to a custom software program and then they come to you later and go, "Man, we need something custom." And then you talk about the unraveling of that too. I mean, because now
Yeah.
you're one, not only you're building a system, but now you're talking about a huge data dump, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Data migration is one of the more expensive components of that transition. I think so. I would kind of back up slightly. Most companies
Yeah.
who are in that situation don't understand that they're in that situation. So they don't come to me and say, I want to build something custom. Now, it does happen. Sometimes they'll recognize it. And sometimes people come to me and they say, hey, I need something custom, and then we evaluate and said, not really. Maybe we just need to build in this middleware, because the way your industry is going, in 3 years you're going to have the fight anyway. So uh so we have to look at, what's going to make sense from them, from a from an investment perspective.
Yeah.
But I would say that, yeah, the most frustrating thing is when they realize, because we start going through the discovery phase with them, and we have all these meetings, and we start digging into their data, and they're like, and that's when all the skeletons get dragged out of the closet, right? Even ones they don't remember having, because there
What's the
were, oh,
craziest story? What's the craziest? You don't have to name the company, but what's the craziest story you've had going into some software and going, "Holy shit, this thing is foobarred," and there's a few of them.
yeah. Let me come up with the one that I can talk about without revealing who it is.
Okay.
Uh, so we had a client. Actually, let me merge a couple together, because
Okay.
symptoms are similar.
Okay.
We had several clients who had built their management system, so not only their website, but their admin backends tied with maybe an ERP system or an external system,
Yeah.
on WordPress.
Okay.
And the biggest thing, the worst problem with WordPress is they start realizing they're getting hacked. And they're like, what's going on here? Why are we getting hacked? Because WordPress, in order to keep it secure, you have to keep it up to date all the time, right?
Right.
And right, because I don't remember. I think it's something like, 5% or 10% of the internet flows through a WordPress site, and so it's a huge attack surface. So every hacker in the world is trying to build a system to automate hacking WordPress sites and compromise information and control servers and so on. So we looked at this company. They had a WordPress built up, and they had a lot of custom implementations and a lot of custom like plugins in WordPress or extensions. And then we realize they all reference this huge mega WordPress extension. Like this thing was tens of thousands of lines of code, and it was kind of hidden in the code base until you dig into it and you realize, oh, everything's right. What is this thing? Oh crap, there's a function in here with 2,500 lines in it, like, and 6,000 if statements, and whatever's going on, right? And again, not just one case of this,
Yeah.
and that's when you go, like, this is a rebuild, right? At
Yeah.
that point,
Yeah.
this is a rebuild,
Super
and
fun.
we're gonna have to address it, right? So,
Yeah, you talked about security, and
yeah.
I've heard and known cases where there are companies who get hacked and they hold their stuff for ransom. I mean, you gotta be secured up because they'll hold your stuff for ransom and say, "Hey, if you don't pay, we're gonna delete your database or drop another worm in it or something like that." And I mean, I've heard of cases where there's been FBI involved and all kinds of stuff. I mean, it's
Oh,
crazy. So you got to be secured up.
we've had FBI involvement in
Yeah.
case where we were addressing hacks. Um, Now the FBI doesn't tell us why they're involved, but I'll give you an interesting story in this. So on the e-commerce side, we had a client who was contacted by, and I think it was actually the Secret Service. And then the FBI got involved, and there were multiple federal agencies involved in this, and they they were on an open source e-commerce platform that's widely used, and we noticed that there was this odd admin user that didn't look right to us,
Okay.
right, in their system. And then so we said, we have some other clients on this platform, we should probably take a look. And sure enough, we found a couple more. And it turns out, and we were like, oh my gosh, what did we do? What did we not secure? What? And it turned out that no, this was thousands and thousands of sites that had been compromised
Whoa.
at the same time. Yeah. Yeah. Worldwide. So we got kind of swept up in that. And fortunately, we didn't have any data loss, no ransom, no, um, there didn't appear to have been any exfiltration done of data. They were just kind of lying in wait, and so we were able to shut things down,
Shut it
lock things
down.
down.
Yeah, lock it
Mhm.
down. Yeah, because that's what
Yeah,
you have to do
yeah,
at that time. You got to
yeah,
lock it down. Wow.
yeah.
All right, so let's go back. I know we're just kind of jumping. I love this
All
conversation, by
right,
the way. It's a lot of
you want
fun.
to hear another interesting
Yes,
security
but
story?
please, please, yes.
Okay, so this was in the old days. Um, we had a client who came to us, and they were notorious for outsourcing SEO to like little companies in Indonesia or India or somewhere,
Okay.
companies that they did not know, that like somebody sent them a spam email and they signed up with them, and they would give them access to their server, unbeknownst to us. And one day, and we took over the site. It was
Just,
already
just,
on
just
Magento.
here. Here's access to my server. Just take
Because
it.
they would say, well, we need access to the server to optimize your SEO, which should have been a red flag. But
Okay. All right.
especially because they didn't know them, like they had never met these people. They were just anyway. They were trying to save money on SEO, and so we so they start complaining that checkout is getting a little slow on their site, and so our CTO, who is also my son, his name's William, uh, looks into it, and he's like, the checkout is referencing a 30 megabyte image.
Okay.
We're like, what the image file? What the hell's going on here? Well, what they had been doing is they had inserted malicious code that was taking credit card information, and it was appending it to an image file, in an automated
Yeah.
way. And this
Yeah.
company had a ton of business. And so their exfiltration was they just had to go grab that file, right?
And they had all the data.
And you would never know, because to look at the image, it seemed okay, but they had so much business and they had attached so much information to this image file that it was now 30 megabytes, right? I can't remember. It was some ridiculous size. Maybe it was only 5, but it was huge, and slowing down the process. And somebody from Russia, or I don't know, North Korea, wherever they were, was accessing this file, and
Oh
we,
my
we were just shocked. And we said, guys, you better let your
God.
users know they've all been compromised.
Trash this. Oh my goodness. This is fun. I knew this conversation was going to be fun. Not where I thought
Yeah.
it was going today, but this is really fun. I love this conversation, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
Let's go back to your organization right now.
Sure.
Okay. You obviously you're doing a lot of custom software. You have some
Yeah.
specialization. What
Yeah.
does your team look like? I mean, do you work with people overseas? I mean, because I know that's popular these days, especially in the development side. I mean, it's the norm.
Yeah.
Do you have people here? Is it a mix? What's your
Yeah. So
landscape like?
we have a mix, and although we have permanent full-time relationships with every developer that is working on software for us. So, and I was of this mindset that, hey, in order to be innovative and to move fast, we all needed to work in the same room all the time. And then
Yeah,
COVID hit,
yeah,
and right,
right.
and fortunately we had just moved all of our development servers to the cloud, like literally weeks before lockdown started. And so we were able to develop. Now everybody was still local, just working from home, right? And we figured out that, with that, and maybe tightening up some of our processes and kind of forcing people to collaborate in certain ways, just
Hmm.
introducing a couple of new touch points and meetings, and reorganizing Slack, et cetera, to make it easier to work with for them. We were very successful in the remote work. I honestly, like, when it hit, I was like, oh, there goes my business. I thought it was dead.
Yeah,
And But it was not. And so we quickly made the transition, and we started at that point. We're like, well, if they can work from home, we can probably start trying to bring people in. And we started. It took us like 5 or 6 different attempts working with developers from different places. We had, some countries where we just didn't feel like we were getting good development work. And finally, I would say our first success was in Brazil, and we started recruiting developers through an agency there, and we eventually just started recruiting our own developers
gotcha.
uh,
Yeah,
from Brazil, because we were, once you get that trusted developer on staff, and somebody, that you really know that you can count on, and who's been through all the background checks and everything, they know kind of people in the local culture, like, if they can trust them or not. Like, they have more of a feeling for that, right? Because that sort of unease that you get when you know
yeah,
you're
yeah.
dealing with somebody who's shady, right? That varies from culture to culture to a certain extent. So that was it. And then we started working, and so those folks work for us as contractors. Technically, the way the law works in Brazil is they basically have their own little LLC, and so we contract with their LLC, but it's really just a website that they sign up for that creates the LLC for them and everything. And so, like, for us, there's almost no difference from an administrative standpoint, including payroll, to pay, to administer those folks. Um, and then we started working in the Philippines, and we were working with a company that was like, uh, a BPO. Which, have you ever been to
What's
Manila?
a
You ever been to the
BPO? I don't know what a BPO is.
business process outsourcing company?
Okay, okay.
Right. So, yeah. Have you ever been to Manila or the Philippines?
No, I've never been to the
Okay.
Philippines.
You get off the plane in the airport, because I've been to visit the team, and
Uh-huh.
you get off the plane in the airport, and the first thing I noticed was, there are just advertisements, the big banners and signs everywhere over the airport. They were all for companies that provide, either accounting, finance, uh,
Like outsource,
software
like
development.
BPO, what you're talking about. Yeah.
They were all BPOs, like every single one of them,
Wow.
except for maybe a few, like Jollibee, which is like sort of their version of McDonald's.
That's
Um,
so interesting. So that's like that's their
that's huge.
industry. That's their
Yeah.
industry out there.
Yeah, yeah, and I
Wow.
can't remember if it's their current president or a previous president who said, "Look, like the Philippines, this was a decade ago. The Philippines is poor. We've got to, if we're going to pull ourselves out of poverty, we got to invest in education." And they just like hammered in, everybody's got to get an education. Everybody's got to learn to do something, and that's how
That's how
they
they
kind. I mean,
wow.
yeah, that's how they really grew out of that.
What an
But
interesting story.
yeah. But we worked with a company that was already there in part because the administrative side of things was difficult,
Yeah.
uh, more difficult there. We didn't, doing background checks and that sort of things, a little bit different, a little harder there. And so, we wanted to make sure that our operational security was very tight with that team. And we have a team over there that works for the, technically they're employed by this other company,
Yeah.
but they're fully integrated.
Your
They
stuff.
are on our bonus program, and they're and they have our holidays and everything. They even work our hours, which amazes me that they would do that. But yeah,
They have to.
they're fully integrated into our teams.
That's
So
great. That's great. You talked about the cloud, right? Uh,
right,
versus, a lot of years there were companies, and there's still companies that have their own servers, right?
yeah, hmm
And again, you're speaking to a guy who, I mean, I know a little bit about this
sure,
kind of stuff, but what's
yeah.
your opinion on really these days with all the amount of access to keeping things on a server versus pushing things up to a cloud?
Well, so it depends on where that server is located and how it's being administered. So we and this was a while ago, we had
Yeah.
servers like in our office on a static internet connection. So they had a static
Okay.
IP address. We could host websites for clients on there. Uh, and we soon realized that was, that was a really bad idea. Because we were in this office that was kind of along a major thoroughfare that was being completely redone. And they come into us like on a Thursday and they say, "Hey, like your power's going to be off all weekend." Uh, and I'm like, wait. I got like websites serving out of here. Like, how's that going to work? But yeah, we got them
A
to get us
generator or
some
something?
generators and stuff. Yeah, so it was
Yeah.
great. Yeah, like I spent the entire weekend in the office, gassing up the generators and all that. But the but if you have so we moved from there at that point. We moved from there to a data center, and that's where we were
Mhm.
hosting. We had quite a few clients websites hosted in a data center on servers that we managed directly, and they were not virtualized resources, but because they were actual like physical servers, but they were kind of what we would call multi-tenant. Like you'd have more than one website on the same computer,
Sure.
and we did that for a while. But the price of cloud computing and cloud servers and storage just kept dropping and dropping and dropping. And eventually we said, well, this doesn't make any sense. We moved everything to the cloud. Almost everything we have now is hosted by Google Cloud
Yeah.
services. Yeah.
So it's cheap enough to do it, and the security of doing it, and the double back, and the backups, and the not going down, and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, I think there's something to be
Yeah.
said about that. So, listen, a few more questions before I go. This has been great, by the way. Okay, I
Thanks.
feel like we've
Good.
just scratched the tip of the iceberg on some of the stuff we want to talk
Sure.
about, but
Sure.
I've loved the conversation we've had. Anyway, that's
Great.
been more fruitful. Um, if you're a company looking at somebody doing custom software for your organization, or what did you
Mhm.
call it? Where you used the term. I should have kept it. I think I wrote it down, but I wrote it down. I pushed it away. But if you're a company looking at an organization to do custom software for you, what three questions should they be asking them?
Oh wow, that's a really good one. So first of all, I'd want to know about their past experience. You know, uh, second, I would want to know about their approach.
Okay.
But the third thing, and I'm not sure if it's one question, but it's certainly a question that needs to be answered, and that is, are they going to be there for you when things get tough? And do they have the ability to pull in resources you need when unexpected needs arise? Otherwise, what you end up with is, a never ending project, or you end up with, never being able to accomplish quite what you want to do in the short term. And in the long term, they may develop this great piece of software for you, but then here you go, it's running on a server. Here's the keys to the server.
Yeah.
Well, what if something goes wrong, right? What if
Yes.
three months from now I need to do some feature enhancement? You
Update.
know,
Yeah.
yeah, what if the language is going out of security updates, and I need to update the language that it's built on? All that sorts of, like, you need somebody that's going to provide that service. And so you have to figure out, like, okay, given how long I'm going to be in this business, like, are these guys going to come through for that? And I would talk to their past clients about it. We have clients that we've been servicing since the very beginning, and most of our clients are multi-year clients that we've had. We don't really, we have very little client churn, and you want a company that kind of has that reputation, because you want to know, these guys, can I work with them, and are they going to stick to it when I really need them to?
Yeah, absolutely. And listen, check out Paul's site. I mean, that was one
Thanks.
of the things I noticed. Were some of your case studies. I mean, you've done everything from welding companies to
Yeah,
clothing companies to food, treat services, automotive. I mean, the whole gamut. So to
yeah,
be able to have that in there, that shows that you've got a track record with SMB businesses, which is really the wheelhouse of the backbone of the country at this point. And
yeah,
realistically, people they can call and check and look at case studies and see kind of impact that you made. And I think that's a really good point, is finding somehow, and I would encourage anything that you do, just finding clients that have worked with anybody you're looking at, and understanding the getting firsthand from the clients how well things worked out. I think that's really
yeah,
great. So
absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah.
So what's next for you, man? What's next for your company? What's on the horizon? What's on the growth path?
So we're growing in two different ways.
Yeah.
One is, our core business, the software development side of things, is, we're continuing to market and grow that side of the business. But as I told you a little while ago, we developed this SaaS service for
Yeah.
the gun business. Well, we're launching new products, and so we're actually developing our own services, and it gives us quite an advantage, because then we have to be able to keep things running and scaling and all that sort of stuff. So we have to know how to do that for our own business, but it also kind of spills over into advantage for our client. I think that's where we're really, we're expecting to launch at least one new product next year, possibly two, and that's where you'll see us go. But that doesn't, that's just growth on top of what we're already doing. So we'll continue in the consultancy and building software for other folks.
That's great, man. That's great. Listen, I have thoroughly enjoyed this interview. This has been a
Same
lot
here.
of fun. I
Yeah,
really have. I love digging into the stories. So where can people find you? They want to get a hold of you. They want to ask you some questions. Where can they
right.
connect with you, Paul?
Yeah, the most obvious one is just to go to razoyo.com,
Yeah.
razaoyo.com/contact, and just fill out a contact form, and it will get to me. Just say, hey, I heard you on, Dave's show and on
Yeah.
Unfinished Business, and wanted to connect with you. Or they can go to LinkedIn, and I'm very active on LinkedIn.
Great.
Uh, so I'm on there every day, pretty much every day, even most weekends, unfortunately. I need to dial that back probably, but they're just, it's /PW Byrne, PWBYRNE.
Yeah.
But they'll find me, because if you can find Rosoyo, you'll find me on it, and just reach out to me on LinkedIn, mention the show, and I'll definitely get back to you.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Paul, listen, I want to thank you for being here. This has been a great
You do this.
show. Everybody, listeners out there, do us a favor. I always say this, but do us a favor. Like this show and share this show with one person. The growth has been great. The feedback has been great. And that's why we've been able to grow as quickly as we have, because you all out there are supporting us and doing this. And you're hearing the true lives and the true stories of business owners. And if we can touch one person out there, either to start a business or not start a business, that's okay too, because it's not for everybody. But more importantly, I want to thank you for being here. I want to thank you all for listening. Wealth, health, success to all of you, and we will see you next time.
Unfinished Business Podcast Show with your host, David Slyman.